You are going to die. I don't mean that as an abstract idea or a fact about people in general that doesn't affect you. I mean it as a fact about you, the person watching this video right now, wherever you are. You only have one life and it's going to end. You don't know when, you don't know where, and you don't know how. But when it happens, any plans, hopes and dreams you haven't managed to achieve yet will die with you. I know that's not how most YouTube videos start, and I know that most people, when they're confronted with that fact, want to push it away. You notice the thought, feel a flash of discomfort, and then your mind moves on to the usual stuff. And the thought goes back into whatever drawer we keep it in when we're not looking at it. The Stoics noticed that we all do this. They even gave it a name, and they built a habit specifically to stop us from dodging it. Not to make you feel bad and not to drag you into despair, but to give you the one thing that really thinking about death seriously and honestly has always given to people who actually do it. It gives you clarity, a kind of clear-headedness you simply can't get any other way. The clarity that comes from living with the end of your life always somewhere in view. Today we're talking about Memento Mori, what it actually is, what it isn't, what the Stoics said about it, and how modern science backs it up, and how to practice it in a way that doesn't leave you feeling stuck or hopeless, but does the opposite. It gives you a sharper, more grateful, more fully lived life. Welcome back to the Stoic Mind Mechanic. My name's Tim Howell. Over the last few episodes we've been building up to a toolkit of Stoic habits, the dichotomy of control to determine what you can and can't control, negative visualization, journaling, the morning review, and voluntary discomfort. Each of these is really just one way of putting into practice the big Stoic idea that ultimately the quality of your inner life depends on how well you approach the things that actually matter. Memento Mori ties it all together. More than any other habit, it shows you what really matters by taking away the comfortable lie that you've got endless time to work it out. It pulls everything we've covered so far into one place and gives it its whole point. And it does that not just by adding something new, but by taking something away. The cozy, unreal feeling that your life will just keep going forever. Memento Mori is Latin for remember that you will die. But the habit is much older than the Latin phrase, and knowing where it comes from makes it richer. There's an image from ancient Rome that I think is one of the most loaded images in all of history. It depicts a Roman general coming home in triumph from a foreign campaign. The full parade, the works, going through the streets, the crowds, the cheering, a crown of laurel leaves on his head. But he didn't ride alone at the peak of his glory. Right behind him on the chariot stood a slave, and that slave had one job, every so often to lean in and say to him, Respice post te hominem te memento. Look behind you, remember you are only a man. Look behind you. At the height of fame, surrounded by cheering crowds in his greatest moment, a powerful man in Rome was being reminded by a slave that he was going to die one day, that the parade would end, that the glory wouldn't last, and that under the crown was a body that would one day stop working. This habit, built right into the ceremony on purpose, to stop the general getting too full of himself by reminding him that he would one day die, is where the Stoic idea of Memento Mori comes from. And what's striking is the timing of when they thought it was needed. Not in defeat and not in hard times, not when death already felt close, but at the very top of the general's game, exactly when it's easiest to forget you're going to die, and most dangerous to forget it. The Stoics took this and made it something private and daily, not a show or put on at a moment of public glory, but a quiet habit a person could bring to every morning, every big decision or every real choice. Marcus Aurelius in his book Meditations comes back to this more than almost anything else. He reminds himself of past emperors who were powerful and successful men and points out that they're gone now, not just dead but forgotten. Their names faded in the mists of time and their achievements turned to dust. Marcus writes, and I'm going to paraphrase this here, Alexander the Great and his stable boy Hephaestion are both equally dead now. Alexander, one of the most famous men who ever lived, and a man who nobody remembers, they're the same now. So where was the real difference? It was always in the quality of their character, and that's the only thing that was ever really worth having. I want to be really clear here about what thinking about your own death actually does for you, because most people assume it just makes you anxious or gloomy. But the Stoics found the opposite, and so has modern research. So there are three gifts, three things that come from honestly and regularly confronting your own mortality. The first gift is that it makes clear what really matters. There's a well-studied effect in modern psychology called mortality salience. What happens when death is brought into the front of your mind, made real, present and personal. Study after study shows that this shifts people's attention away from the small, petty stuff and towards what they truly care about. The things that used to eat up your attention, a little insult here or comparing yourself to others, small ambitions, they all tend to shrink fast once you really hold your own death in the front of your mind. And the things that do matter, relationships, your work, or the kind of person you're actually trying to be, they tend to take on the importance that they really deserve. Seneca saw this as the whole point of the practice when he writes to Lucilius, "Let's get our minds ready as if we've already reached the end of life. Let's put nothing off. Let's settle life's accounts every single day. Whoever finishes each day as if it were complete is never short of time." The second gift is that it makes the present moment feel more real. When you really hold on to the fact that this exact moment, this one unrepeatable moment, won't come again, the way you focus on it changes. The conversations you're having isn't just a conversation, it's one of a limited number of interactions that you'll ever have with that person. The morning light through your window isn't just light, it's one of a limited number of mornings that you'll ever see. Now that's not gloomy, it's actually what makes real presence possible. The calm, unhurried kind of attention that a busy mind, one that never thinks about ending, just can't reach. Marcus writes about this with both sharp thinking and real feeling when he says, "Perfection of character is this, to live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, and without pretense. Without panic, without numbness, without faking it. Those three things together are the whole point. Knowing you'll die doesn't make you frantic like rushing to tick off a bucket list. It gives you something quieter, a steady, calm focus of someone who knows there's enough time for what matters and not enough time to waste on what doesn't." The third gift is staying steady when you lose something. Every Stoic habit we've covered in this series has, in some way, been getting you ready for loss, because loss is part of everyday life. Telling the difference between what you can and can't control gets your mind ready for outcomes you don't get to decide. Picturing loss ahead of time gets your feelings ready for the day when something you have now is gone. Choosing discomfort gets your body ready for losing comfort. Memento Mori gets your whole self ready for the biggest loss of all, the end of life itself. Someone who's truly come to terms with their own death, the Stoics argued, is free from the deepest fear most people carry around. Almost every fear we have, underneath it all, is some version of this one fear. Face it honestly and you loosen the grip of nearly all the others. Epictetus, true to form, doesn't ease you into this topic gently. He starts his teaching on death right where most discussions of it usually stop. Never say about anything that you have lost it, only that you have returned it. Your child died, it was returned. Your wife died, she was returned. Your estate was taken, it too has been returned. But the person who took it was a scoundrel. What does it matter to you through whose hands the giver reclaimed what was lent? We came across this line before in the video on negative visualization, and I said it can feel cold and heartless at first. I want to dig into that a bit more now, because I think the coldness is partly down to translation and partly down to missing the context. From a translation point of view, Epictetus isn't saying grief is wrong or that you shouldn't feel loss. He's offering a different way to think about it, a way of holding the loss that stops it from breaking the person left behind. The difference between "I lost this person" and "this person was given back" isn't about how much love or grief is involved. It's about how you read the event, whether the loss feels like theft, which breeds anger and bitterness, or like a return, which still hurts, but without the resentment. Now, in contextual terms, Epictetus wrote these words as a slave. A slave owns nothing for certain. Things, people, even those he loved, any of it could be taken away without warning and with no way to stop it. This isn't comfortable philosophy from someone who's never actually lost anything. It's a hard-earned way of coping from someone who had to find a way to survive loss without becoming bitter or not survive it at all. He's not telling you to skip the grief, he's giving you a way to feel it fully without letting it destroy you. The Stoic Memento Mori isn't just one single exercise. It's really a family of related habits. So here are the 3 most useful versions and when to use each. The first version is the daily reminder, the shortest and easiest to keep up. One sentence written or just said out loud first thing in the morning or last thing at night. Today could be my last. Not as a drama and not to scare yourself, but as a small, quiet reset. A 1-second nudge that today is real and won't come round again. And not just a practice run for some real life that starts once things get easier. This can be as simple as one line in your morning journal, which we talked about before, or a physical object. The ancient Romans sometimes kept a skull on their desk. Today it could be any object that reminds you that things don't last forever. What matters isn't the object itself, but the job it does, by regularly reminding you that tomorrow may never come. The second is a deeper, slower reflection done maybe once a week or once a month. This is closer to what Marcus did in his meditations, really sitting with the idea that things don't last, looking at specific people and things in your own life and honestly holding the fact that they'll end. Not as something scary, just as a fact. The person you love most, what your body can do right now, the work that means the most to you. All of it will end one day. So what does that mean for how you treat it today? The third, and this one's optional for anyone who wants to go further, is a full death meditation. A practice borrowed from several different contemplative traditions. The Stoics gave it their own philosophical backing. Deliberately and fully imagining your own death. Not the details, those you can't know and guessing won't help, but the experience of it. Done carefully and in the right state of mind, this is one of the most powerful experiences in philosophy. It doesn't lead to despair. In every tradition that's tried it, Buddhists, Stoic, existentialists, people report the same thing. Instead of making the fear of death worse, it actually melts it away. The thing you were scared to look at directly turns out, once you actually look, to be the very thing that makes the life you've got feel worth living. 2 areas of modern research speak directly to the Stoic idea, and they land in the same place in a striking way. The first is terror management theory. Research started by Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon and Tom Pizzinski, building on the work of anthropologist Ernest Becker. Their big finding is that a lot of what humans do, building things, chasing status or creating art and building whole systems of meaning, is driven, often without us realizing, by our fear of death. We build civilization and chase status and make art partly as a way of managing the fear that comes from knowing that we'll die. You might think this proves we're better off not thinking about it, but the research has found something far more interesting than that. People who face their own mortality directly and thoughtfully, instead of keeping it at a distance using culture or busyness, turn out differently. They're less defensive, chase status less, and live more in line with what they actually value. Facing death head-on in a thoughtful way rather than an anxious one tends to melt the fear rather than making it worse. The second area is post-traumatic growth, a well-proven finding that people who've had a real close encounter with death through serious illness or a near-miss accident or losing somebody very close to them very often come out the other side with a completely different view of what actually matters to them. Relationships feel more precious. Small annoyances stop mattering. A real sense of presence and gratitude shows up that wasn't there before. The Stoic Memento Mori is basically an attempt to get you to that same shift in purpose without having to suffer the trauma that actually causes it. To get the clarity that a near-death experience gives you through thinking about it on purpose instead of having to go through the real suffering. 2,000 years of Stoic teaching, modern psychology, same answer. Go figure. I want to finish with a line from Marcus Aurelius that I come back to whenever I catch myself acting like I've got endless time. He says, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. If the gods exist and are good, they would not want you to leave unwillingly. And if they do not exist, why would you want to stay in a world without them? But if some gods exist and some do not, and if they care at all, surely they care most about this, that the rational part of you remains uncorrupted and all else follows." You could walk out of life right now, not as a threat, not as something to dread, as permission, as the clearest possible way to see what actually matters. If this were your last hour, if this were truly the day you'd been given and not a rehearsal for a better day to come, what would you do differently? What would you stop doing? What would you start? What would you say? To who and how soon? Remember that you can't change the past and that today is tomorrow's yesterday. The Stoics didn't ask this question to scare themselves. They asked it to be honest with themselves. Not to make life feel shorter, but to make sure that the life you've still got left feels fully lived. There's a huge difference between actually living your life and just spending it waiting for the real thing to start. So here's your task from this episode. Tonight, before you go to sleep, write down one sentence. Not a recap of your day, just one sentence about what you'd do differently if you knew this was your last year. Just one. Don't try to answer it, just write it down. Sit with it, let it ask you what it's asking. So if this episode has shifted something in you, if it's given you even a flash of clarity about what really matters, then go do something with that today. Not tomorrow, today. Because this isn't really about remembering that you'll die. It's about living like you've actually remembered it. So next time we'll bring you everything from this section together, telling apart what you can and can't control, picturing loss ahead of time, journaling, the morning check-in, choosing discomfort, and Memento Mori, all into one simple, practical, everyday framework. A complete Stoic practice for modern life. The episode that ties it all together and shows you how to build a habit that actually lasts for years, not just a few weeks. If you found this episode useful, please like and subscribe. Maybe share the video with someone who's really busy, so busy that they've stopped noticing their life going by. They might just be ready to hear it. So until then, keep calm, keep stoic, and I'll see you in the next one.